And we appreciate you.
Yeah.
I appreciate having the opportunity.
So we got together with Miss Julie Hardeman, who is a parent mentor, and we got together and wanted to talk about Lainey and her transition as she's going to turn 18, and we're talking about what we have to prepare for it with that.
Okay.
So, Miss Julie, if you want to start.
Yeah, in the world of education, we call that the transfer of rights. And so all kids who are in public schools and private schools, and technically even homeschool, when they turn 18, all rights in Georgia that are given to adults are given to our students, and that includes students with special needs. And so how we prepare for that in public school in special education is that we have a lot of conversations with families about transfer of rights. And so a little bit behind that, what that would mean in your IEP meeting, either the year before your child turns 18 or at least 6 months prior, your IEP team would have that conversation with you that Julie will be turning 18 on this date. And this means that all rights that were given to you as her parent now transfer to Julie. And it is a big aha moment for a lot of parents because their first fear is, I need to be in the loop in order to protect Julie. And so there are a lot of safeguards that are put in place to help families with that, because obviously we're not going to not include families. We're still going to include families on notices, and they're still a member of the team. So some of the tools that families can use to help prepare for that moment in time are things called power of attorneys. And that could be for financial, I was going to use financial aid, but it's not financial, it's financial matters, legal matters. There's a power of attorney for healthcare, or what we more likely call it now. You hear about it when you check into a hospital, the healthcare directive. There's a process called supported decision making, and that's basically a function where the family helps guide their adult dependent with their decision making process, and they use those power of attorneys to help the healthcare providers meet their legal, HIPAA requirements. So when you have somebody who's entering a facility and that person is not able to make an informed choice, a parent or a guardian could present that healthcare directive or that power of attorney. But that's still, you've already talked to that individual about what they would want. And we see that a lot with families who are considering having maybe an elective surgery. It's a subject we have to really let families talk about themselves. Why would you ever need this document? And of course, like I have a healthcare directive for my husband. He has one for me. We have it for our adult children, and we've got the powers of attorney in place. And then the most restrictive tool is called guardianship, which removes all rights from the individual. And 30, 40 years ago, that was kind of pretty much an exclusive tool. They would say, your kid hits 18, let's talk to you about going down to the courthouse and applying for guardianship. And it is very restrictive, and it takes away so many rights of the individual. And you think about how we used to institutionalize individuals, especially individuals with Down syndrome. And now we have individuals with Down syndrome who are adults living in their communities, working, living in group homes. It's like, why would you take away all their rights when maybe the power of attorney or supported decision-making could meet that person's need? But it is a family decision. Educators do not really get into having those discussions with what you should do. Our goal is to share all the information with you. So go ahead.
Is power of attorney more of a joint decision-making process versus guardianship, and we make all the decisions for her?
Pretty much so. A power of attorney, the individual could override it. If the individual is standing there with you and you say, I have a power of attorney. I use my father as an example. I have a power of attorney for my aging father. But and now he does have diminished capacity. And we put it in place 15 years ago. So 15 years ago, I could have taken the power of attorney when he was in the hospital and utilized it with his care team. But if he was not of diminished capacity, the consent would be by him if he was there. So when you think about, school-age youth, adults, 18 to 21 and young adults, why would you want a power of attorney? Well, some of it would be to help manage their finances. You think about, our goal is to help our kids get into employment. Employment means paycheck. You want somebody there to help with that. Those ABLE accounts, achieving a better life experience, and in Georgia it's called stable. You'd want to have yourself on the account and have a power of attorney established with your bank so you could communicate with the bank. But it gives that person, your individual, your adult with disabilities, more independence. Supported decision making is really, you sit there and have a conversation with your loved one about what they want to do and what are the options, and help them determine what's options best for them. But for healthcare providers and businesses like banks, you would still need that power of attorney. But I'm not an attorney, so I always say go back and talk to your own attorney. But when you have the guardianship, it does take everything away from the individual. A couple decades ago, I would see that sometimes more often because healthcare plans required the parent, the caregiver, to have guardianship in order to keep that individual on their employer's healthcare plan. Now, in a lot of employers' healthcare plan, there's provisions in there that a person with a disability can stay on past 26. I don't know if it's all healthcare plans, but there was a lot of reasons why people did pursue guardianship was because of health care to keep the plan.
Does it affect, for instance, Medicaid in that instance?
I'm not 100% sure, but Medicaid is determined on income. So at 18 is the magic number, like for your child. She'll be considered an adult at 18, and her resources will be considered at 18. So if you have guardianship of someone, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to research that. If you had assets that went to them or they had health insurance, you're no longer a person most in need. So it does impact those community waivers that I talk about often, those now comp waivers, because you have an access to health care and you got family supporting you. You're not as much in need as this other adult who has maybe a single caregiver who doesn't have access to those resources. So everything's based on most in need. So, but transfer of rights is a big thing. And what I do in our community is I do every year offer a big transfer of rights workshop, and it's open to the region. And, as we are post-COVID now, we will start doing those back in person. And I recommend that families in middle school come because, you're going to hit this and you want to be on the front end of all the options and understanding. And then if you need additional information or you need the opportunity to talk to your own attorney, you have that time. But just knowing the school systems, we're not going to, block you out and not give you the information you need for the IEP team. You're going to be a member of the IEP team. So even though those rights do transfer to your adult dependent at that time. So that's a big one, transfer of rights. And then I know y'all have a list of your transition specialist in Effingham. She had Social Security option on there, didn't she? I don't do a lot with Social Security. It's very personal when we have to ask parents about their resources and everything. But what we do in public schools is we do advise parents that you can go online and apply for Social Security. And there's two different types. There's SSI and SSDI. And I'm not going to go into the difference of them right now. But when I tell parents of kids with disabilities, under 18, they consider your resources. Over 18, they consider the adult dependent's resources. So if you have it as a child, you have to do redetermination at 18 to see if you're still eligible as an adult. They determine if you're able to work. And I always say off the bat, our kids can work, so that's not going to be a reason why to get Social Security. But a lot of families need it for the Medicaid benefit. So that's why they pursue it, and they should. And usually there's some financial income that comes with it from SSI or SSDI. But what we do in school systems, we do send you give you the resources. Like in Savannah, we send folks to Mall Boulevard for a meeting. And we also help complete the letters of redetermination when they come to the schools. We do that through transition side of the house.
And that's required in order to apply for the SSI?
Which part?
Letter of determination?
No, that's if you had Social Security under 18.
Okay.
So when you're 17, they'll trigger a letter saying, "Oh, Julie's becoming an adult in 6 months. We're going to send the letter to the parent and saying, if you want to have this continued, you got to do this part, and the school has to do their part."
So
and
we
the
don't
parents
have
bring it to school.
we don't have SSI for Lainey.
Right. But I would say apply at 18, and
Okay.
if you get denied, appeal. That's what I always
Right.
say, because it's a tool out there that we need our families to use. And when we start talking about these big waivers in a minute, those now comp waivers, the eligibility for now comp waivers, you have to be Medicaid eligible, which means you don't have to be, receiving it, but you have to have Medicaid eligibility. And, it goes back to payer of last resort. And you think about it's for most in need. Who's most in need? Individuals who have no resources, no families. That's how they look at it. And that's one thing you do want to check off. So you want to address the transfer of rights. You want to address, Social Security. You don't have to take it. I always say, take it, take it.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and then that triggers, we do want you to work. So then we have a conversation about, you're going to get a job and you can have income if you're on SSI, not SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, but SSI. You have to keep your assets under $2,000 or whatever Social Security Administration sets that threshold at. So that's why I talk about at another workshop with families of kids who are eligible for Social Security, who want to work in supportive employment, is Social Security work incentives and then accounts like Georgia Stable. So I kind of like have a spill. We've come all this way from 40 years ago when I started teaching, we institutionalized individuals with Down syndrome. Now our kiddos are working and earning income, and we want to keep more of that income in their pockets, but we want to protect that Medicaid benefit. That's usually the fear of families, is losing the Medicaid benefit, So there's a lot of great tools out there and that they can use to preserve income in their pocket. This is through Social Security Administration. This is not like a side gig somewhere someone's trying to, do something fancy. It's through Social Security navigators. And we help them meet with families in our community. And the reason why you probably haven't really heard about that yet, because y'all are still in high school. Mm-hmm. And we try to address topics of, parents are not really interested in hearing about guardianship and power of attorney until about 16, 17, when it starts coming up over the horizon. Then they want to hear about what's going to happen when school eligibility runs out. And then, great, I've got a job, but I don't want to lose my benefit. And I love my job. That's when we talk about Social Security work incentives. And we talk about how to put that income into stable accounts and use it for qualified expenses to support the individual. And then
talk a little bit about that relationship. So if an individual does have a job, if you have a stable account set up, mm-hmm. the money is put into the stable account?
This is how it would kind of go. All right, so I have a job and I receive Social Security. Let's say I have a $700 a month benefit, just to make it easy math for me at this time of night. And I'm working, and I'm working. Let's say I'm bringing home another $1,000 a month. Okay, now if I don't spend down and keep it under that $2,000 threshold, once I have more than $2,000 in my account, and they do that check, that review, and if you've had an adult, a aging senior who's gone on Medicare, the Medicaid, and nursing home. Some people, they're kind of familiar with this process. It will bump you off your Social Security and your Medicaid until you get the spend down spent. And then you have to reapply, get back on. So what you can do.
That's like a checking, that's a checking account balance they check?
Yeah, they check everything that belongs to that individual. Because now they're over 18, they have their own Social Security number. If they're on any state resources, but they have, the big thing is they're on Medicaid. So that's the thing, Medicaid's tied to income thresholds. So what a parent and an adult dependent can do is use Social Security work incentives. And those are incentives put in place by the Social Security Administration to encourage individuals with disabilities to work. It's very much like taking your work. It's a formula. I say it's a math formula, but you bring your receipt. Say you use transportation services and you have to buy your tickets to use that transportation service, so you have those receipts. And say you need specialized clothing that's due to your disability, like you need shoes, of extra thick soles or anything tied to your disability and to your work, you can turn those receipts in and they're not counted. That money is not counted against your maximum. And there's a person that actually does the math for you. And they travel around the state and they are in our community. I think they come to Effingham too, but they are in our community. They go to the South Side, to the Social Security office area. They go to like the Goodwill. They go to where people are. They've met people in the public library. And they sit down and you present your receipts and they help you with what you're going to turn in. A lot of times parents have a lease agreement or rent agreement between their adult dependent living in their home and themselves. And they use that too. Now they use that it counts as income for the parent. So some parents have to decide if they want to deal with that. But there's different ways of preserving money. So now you've got those incentives in place. Now you're down to say you got $1,200. Now is when you go to your ABLE account and say, I'm going to put this much into my ABLE account this month. I'm going to put $1,200, let's say. And then I'm going to use my ABLE card for qualified expenses. And remember, you can carry a balance up to, it's over $100,000 now in your ABLE account. And then parents could be on the ABLE account and help transfer the money to that individual's ABLE card, credit card, it looks like, to spend it safely. You no longer we're not a cash economy anymore. So it's not it was 20 years ago, big deal, but now it's like no one uses cash.
Yeah.
But,
right.
So that way that money is protected and it doesn't impact your state and federal benefits. And it's a great tool to keep more money in your pocket, to encourage families to let their adult dependents work. And the downfall of it is we just don't share enough information about it on the front end because parents, that's their big fear. When I talk to them,
Yeah.
Julie's done a great job in the community. It's time to talk about supportive employment, do that refer to Georgia vocational reevaluation. And they don't want to do it because they don't want to lose their benefits. Because
so if you have a dependent child that's making $12,000 a year, they can put it in that ABLE account. And then it's not, and it's not that $2,000 threshold.
Right. Yeah. And the thing with ABLE, it's like a 529 college account. They have categories of expenses, but it's like housing, food, stuff like that. You use it for qualified expenses, and then you can have leisure stuff. It's a great tool between using the Social Security work, incentives, and using an ABLE account is going to protect that federal benefit of Medicaid. And people, and the formula that they use when they do the figuring, they write off so much up front, and then for every $1 you earn, they knock off $2. It's very fair. They don't penalize the individual with a disability who wants to go to work. It's actually they encourage it. But at the end of the day, you've got to state you can't have assets over $2,000 right now. And that kind of goes back into, families who want to leave their loved one with disabilities as a beneficiary. They'll
gifts
knock
can
them
be
off.
placed in that as well.
Well, you can fund your ABLE account, I think, up to $14,000 a year, but you might want to consider a special needs trust or something, because you can fund from a trust, you can fund an ABLE account. You can't take money out of the ABLE account and put it in the trust. But you don't ever want to leave an individual outright with assets, because it will knock them off of their state and federal benefits, and they'll have to spend down, and it'll disappear. Where it's a state benefit, it's a federal benefit. We pay taxes for this. I want to see people in my community have the opportunity to use these incentives and state and federal benefits. So.
Yeah, because we've had the situation where we have grandparents that want to gift money, and we're careful about how much money they should gift them. But if they have an ABLE account, they can put that gift in the ABLE account, and it wouldn't count against.
Yeah, and I think there's something called a Miller trust, which is a financial tool. And there is a state trust, because some people don't want to spend the money on a private trust because they can be a little pricey. Every year we've been fortunate that Smith and Barrett has donated a special needs trust to the Low Country Down Syndrome out of Champions. and I think it's valued at $5,000. So they do that because they're really tied to the community and want to support our families. I would say the grandparents who want to do that, see if you can leave it set up a Miller trust for the individual. Look at other tools, and then if you can't, if the cost of setting the trust up is problematic, then there is a community trust that's managed at the state level, and the fee to put money into it's very, very low. So that's another opportunity for families to pursue. To look at that, yeah. Yes, state trust.
The State of Georgia Trust.
Yeah, I think it's called the Community Trust, and I'll have to get you the organization who manages it, but it's bidded out every so often. I think it's managed through. I'm not sure who manages actually. I was going to say Georgia Council for Developmental Disabilities, but I know families who have done that way. But again, it's so easy to fund that that ABLE account. The drawdown is there's a threshold for that, but I think it's over $100,000. And there is a Medicaid payback if that individual passes away and there's money in the trust. So much of it goes back to Medicaid. So, it's you have to really evaluate it. But again, it's a good tool to enhance the quality of that individual's life, because who wants to have to worry about spending down every single cent and not be able to save anything?
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And there's word on the street that Social Security is looking at raising that $2,000 to $10,000. So we're waiting to see. We're tracking that legislation.
And that's
so we talked. Yeah.
Is that state or is that a federal?
I believe it's federal because it's Medicaid.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, that eligibility for Medicaid drives the train for so many state and federal services. So we talked about the transfer of rights and the trust and Social Security work incentives and ABLE. And I guess we need to talk a little briefly about now comp waivers. Are we ready for that one? That's another. Do y'all have that on the list? When y'all talk to your
comp waivers on?
Honestly, the only two things on my list are legal guardianship and Social Security.
Okay. Well, I always, I feel like a, carnival hawker because I talk about now waiver at community-based waivers all the time. And these are federal waivers. And NOW stands for New Options Waiver, and COMP means Comprehensive Waiver. And they're both pretty much the same, except the funding level in the COMP waiver is a lot higher because it addresses, I believe, residential care. When our kiddos are in school, you start hearing people who are parent mentors and transition specialists talk a little bit about life after high school and who pays for those services. So when you think about those day habilitation programs, long-term supportive employment programs, and, in our community, think about employability, they have a day hab, SOTO, Gateway supportive employment. Those services are paid by these big federal community-based waivers, now COMP. And those waivers are specially designed for adults with developmental and or intellectual disabilities. So it's really easy to kind of figure out the eligibility piece for the kids who are on intellectual side, because we look at intellectual scores and stuff like that, or they look at it. For our kids with developmental disabilities, those kids could have autism. Autism has some different categories. They have to hit several more boxes to be eligible for that. So this is the process I follow to share that information in my area. So the first thing I talk about most likely to families is to talk about family support. Family support in our communities, B&B Care, Easter Seals, and Gateway. Those are funds that come through the state legislature to these agencies. And these agencies don't give families the funds. They pay for an array of goods and services. And the eligibility for those services are very similar to the now COMP waiver, developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities. But in family support, individuals with that medical diagnosis of autism can't access family support. It's when they go after the big chunks of money. They could still stay on family support, but unless they have an intellectual disability with the autism, they most likely are not going to be eligible for those big waivers. And there's some other resources.
So a diagnosis of Down syndrome would qualify.
Right. because there's a medical diagnosis. It's listed out there for them, and those eligibilities are very different than school system eligibilities for services. We talk about the same categories, but different things mean different things to different groups of professionals.
Right.
So yeah, Down syndrome is an automatic in. Now there are exceptions. I know some adults with Down syndrome around the state who have done things with their typical peers, who cognitively have been able to keep up, who have even received a regular high school diploma, not a modified curriculum one, and that's kind of an exception to the rule with Down syndrome. So that's why they go and they look at that testing, and they require that testing to be less than 3 years old when you do the application. So families, you can apply when they're young. And I always say apply when they're young because you want them on, I call it the list. You want the state to know that in this zip code, there's a person with this type of disability in this home with maybe living with an aging grandparent. They ask a lot of information, very intrusive information, but they want to know, what's going on, because it's all based on most in need. Because if you have a young person under the age of 18 who has a developmental disability and both caregivers suddenly died, then what happens to that individual? If that person's on that planning list, that person's priority goes to the top of the list because now that person is most in need. And every year they talk. So we start really pushing it, especially for kiddos who have significant disabilities or who have caregivers who are aging, or there's some instability with the caregivers, because we want the state to know that we have this person in our community who's going to need the support. So we always do family support because that's an easy roping them in. Their family support and these waivers fall under DBHDD, which is the Department of Behavior, Health, and Developmental Disability, my favorite acronym. We're in Region 5. It serves, I think, 28 counties, but their office is located here in Savannah on the campus of Georgia Regional. And because of that, they come to a lot of workshops. We have a lot of presence from them. They participate in our activities. And it's been great. It's been great for our families because of that. Because, sometimes it is based on relationships. So you're into family support. You're participating in family support. Now you're heading high school. It's time to do that application. And if you've done the application for family support, the application for Now Comp is really easy. I mean, it's like 5 pages, and then the supporting documentation, which is the birth certificate, proof of insurance. Again, they won't award it until you're Medicaid eligible. But if everything falls apart in your house, you're technically going to be Medicaid eligible. Now, if you've been left $1 million, you're not going to get it until you spend down. So that's what we talk about, the trust and everything else earlier with families. So you apply, and they check with you, and they develop a plan very similar to an individual family support plan or an IEP about your needs, and then they kind of track you. School districts track you too. They're payer of last resort, so they're saying to our families, and I'm going to say this to the Down syndrome community, you're eligible to stay through 22. Unless you got some place to go and the funding secured, I really recommend, as a parent mentor, utilize your services under IDEA, the law under special education, because I've seen kiddos leave with their cohort and not have a place to go for 3 years because the funding didn't come through. So they couldn't go to the sheltered workshop or to supportive employment. And kids with developmental disabilities regress really easy. So utilize that. And I say, push your school district to develop creative opportunities for our kids. Project Search is one that's happened over the last several decades. We need more transition academies in our public school. So you're in high school, you're on the waiver waiting list, you're using family support, you've had this conversation about transfer of rights, and we're kind of getting up to that 12 to 24 month exit period from public school. Well, we're going to be talking to you now about GVRA, Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. Now, while you're in high school, when technically you hit 11th grade, all kids in Georgia who have disabilities, that include IEP, which is special education, 504, which is the Office of Civil Rights, those are kids that receive accommodations, but they don't need specialized instruction. It's a different house that governs that law. And we have lots of kids who have disabilities and who meet the criteria for eligibility under GVRA, but not for educational purposes. So they have a barrier to employment. It's the best way to describe it. So now we're going to help you with that. We're going to help you connect with that community agency. And I tell parents, it's not like school teacher. They keep after you because our law says we have to keep after you. State agencies, I call it one and done. So we want to help you do the application, and then we help you track it. Where are you in the pipe? And a great way to think about GVRA services is think about Night of Champions and do that backwards planning. How do I get my kid to be a champion? Well, you do the now comp waiver. You work with your kid for independence and advocacy about his disability while he's still in school.
Sorry.
That's okay. You want to work with your IEP team at setting a strong transition plan that I want Julie to work. Give me the tools that Julie needs to have to work. And now apply for GVRA. And you want to have that now comp. So you want to go to Project Search, or you want to do an internship. GVRA, and I'm now going to switch it to VR, vocational rehabilitation, will provide the funding for those support services. And then once you're secure in your job after 90 days, those services transfer over to DBHDD, now comp waiver, for supportive employment. So they all work in tandem together, and they all communicate outside the school district. So our parents have to really know the process, because they're not going to, I know it, and parent mentors know it, and our staff knows it. And we actually track a year after our kids graduate. A lot of people don't realize that statewide, that's a requirement. But we want to make sure that we connect. And then if it all falls apart, we want to bring the transition team back together and reconnect with those agencies. So that's a question to hear about.
So with these things that now that you've talked about, now comp waiver, DBHDD, GVRA, if we Google it online, it'll go to the institution and it'll have.
Yeah. And I was actually setting you up. I didn't know we had the capability to attach a link on StreamYard, but yes, you can. Like if you punch in DBHDD, it'll take you. The thing with, some of these state agencies, it's just so much to dig through. So what, people in my capacity as a parent mentor, I do like a little flyer with everything in one flyer saying, here's the now comp application, how to do it online, but here's paper copies of everything. Here's a brochure about what the heck this is, so you don't have to, as a parent, thumb through it.
Sure.
Same thing with GVRA, Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. You can go in there. Now, we, locally, I know we're going to post this, but we have a workshop in Savannah on updates from Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And I'm really excited about the updates on family support. The state legislator has put a lot of resources back in family support, but especially in respite.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. So Pauline Shaw, our country girl, is going to be doing her piece. And, our thing is, it's, B&B has it, but Easter Seals has it and Gateway has it. It's, it's statewide. We want our families to know about it. But in September, there will be a GVRA forum, and that's going to be at New Hampstead High School, which is off of exit 152 in Bloomingdale. It's 2 miles off. It's at I-16 and 17.
Yep.
Right up a Little Neck Road.
Yeah. And it's going to be, they're going to talk strictly GVRA because there's so many resources that they have. They have a Cave Springs that works with independent living. So if you had an adult that needed to learn how to live independently, you can apply to go to Cave Springs. It is on the other side of the state. That's the downside of that particular one in Roosevelt Warm Springs. But many, many opportunities for individuals with disabilities to acquire living skills and employability skills. And what I like it, if it ever all falls apart, you're 45 years old, and you lose everything, you can always go back to GVRA. It is not a one and done in terms of applying and starting over. But families have to know, where are these folks, and right. These are adult agencies. So that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot going on. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I've been taking notes like a very good student. So our Lainey will be 18 October 1st.
Okay. All
So
right. So
I'm hearing from you that we need to apply for Social Security, but not till after she's 18, because that's when it
right.
only looks at her income.
That's right. Don't say no right now because your income would be included. So
Right. And
yeah.
and so that also, my other question is, Lainey currently, and has been for many years, has Medicaid.
Okay.
He
So
has
she's
the
Medicaid
Katie Beckett
eligible.
waiver Medicaid.
Yep. She's Medicaid eligible. So
that is her only form of insurance. So is that something that we need to, like, are we going to transition insurance into Social Security?
I'm not sure if they come in and they give you, like, is she on straight Medicaid?
She's on the Katie Beckett
Okay.
waiver.
Now her Katie Beckett will end at 18, I believe.
And that's,
And so,
yes.
yeah. And I don't know what the grace period is, so you'll have to apply for
So
it.
I need to apply for straight Medicaid.
Yeah. Well, just apply for
But
Social
if I
Security
apply
right
before
now.
she's 18, she's not going to
be. She's technically, they don't do anything ahead of the power curve. I mean, it's
right.
Be ready, get all your documents together so you can
Okay.
submit it at the same time. And then of course the transfer of rights. Now, because Georgia Legal Services is in Savannah, and I don't know if y'all met Bill Broker. He runs Georgia Legal, and they do a lot of great workshops for our families. He shared with our transition folks power of attorney forms and healthcare directive forms. The healthcare directive form is the same form that you get at a hospital. The power of attorney form is something they use around the state. I'm happy to share that. I mean, I use it with my own kids. I had to have a notary. So that's what I did. We did it with a notary. You have to do it after 18. And there's always a question of, is this person has the capacity to make this choice? And, and I of course say, we're not saying this to anybody, but I'm always thinking, tell me how she doesn't have the capacity to make these choices. But it's an easy way of getting something in place immediately while you see, are you going to need to look at more restrictive stuff, and, or you need to look at the guardianship piece. So I'm happy to share that with y'all to use with Lainey, just to see how it looks and if it works for Lainey. And then you may find it's perfect, or you may find that you need something more restrictive. Hopefully not, because we're seeing a lot of our kids with Down syndrome or families are using power of attorneys under supported decision making.
At first glance, it seems as if we would do power of attorney versus guardianship.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And it's a lot less expensive because it's like maybe $20 for the notary versus $2,000 for the guardianship.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a burden to go after guardianship.
We do not have to meet with an attorney to do that.
Not with these power of attorney forms. You have to have a notary, somebody notarize it. Yeah. So that's I'm not trying to say this. I mean, I always say, go back to your attorney. And of course, they'll say, oh, come to my office and you can do it there for $125. I'm like, again, it's an individual decision, but it has worked for many families. It's the least restrictive option, with protection right now, rather than just let her not have anything in place. Right. So you got that piece, you're looking at that. Your school team should talk about transfer of rights. Now, if Lainey had been Lane, a male, then, I would say that, at 18, our students, even with disabilities, have to register for the draft. Mm-hmm. And so that's always surprising that, that's a criteria. And I said, being military myself, I said, no, don't worry, when that day should come, and let's all hope it doesn't. There's a process there that we look at a qualified fit military force. So that's not going to happen to your child. But
would it disqualify them even if they wanted to go and serve?
The military, a recruiter has the different categories, and it shifts those categories criteria based on the military's need. And it's very different. The military is not a place where they try social experiments and stuff like that. They have a particular function. A lot of times our kids who have mental illness and uncontrollable, like diabetes and stuff like that, are turned away because of the requirements that you have to have. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So just so I understand, though, so the power of attorney is something that we would procure after she's 18?
Yeah, she has to be 18 in
She
order
has
to
to
be
be
able
18.
Yeah, she has to be
And the
18.
transfers rights is something that we don't have anything to do with. That just automatically happens when she
Right.
turns 18. So
That
there's nothing we have to do for that.
Correct. Your school district has a responsibility to tell you about the transfer of rights. Now, your healthcare provider, there's another piece under the medical care. A lot of times that's the threshold where pediatricians will say you need to find an adult provider. So,
Okay.
yeah. So
Right. Okay.
back in the day, those old time doctors would keep, the whole family forever. But now with the specialist and everything. So that's why it's important to have that healthcare directive and that power of attorney. And see, both my girls, my oldest has mental health. So our physician has everything. She's got it in case anything ever happens. So she has to go in my healthcare directive for her and her power of attorney with me on it. So her healthcare provider up in North Georgia would talk to me because it's not automatic anymore. It kills me as a mother, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So those are two really big ones. And then making sure that you learn as much as you can about how these state services work. Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, what they do for our kids, because the funding to get to places like employability comes from GVRA and it comes from DBHDD. Those are the waivers. And so it's important to get on the list if you want your adult to work. And that's our goal for all kids. We want them to work or continue their education until they get a job to work. But so then we go, how do I get all these? How do I do it? Yeah.
So if Lainey does have a job, so we should start looking into an ABLE account. Obviously.
Absolutely. If she has a job under the age of 18, she can use their Social Security work incentive. She can use as well, just to kind of get into the habit of what that is. And yeah, absolutely. An ABLE account is something you could set up. And I think y'all even had to speak.
Go to do that.
Pardon me?
Where do we go to set up the ABLE account?
I can send you the link. I think in our communities, Queensboro Bank has it, but there's a great little PowerPoint on Georgia Finance. I think it is. I'll pull it up and send it to y'all. And taking parents through. I remember one of y'all's beach parties. Brian Hussey brought the guy from Georgia Stable to it. So because he was, but it's an easy thing. I think it costs $50 to set up at the bank, so it's, it's a nice tool.
And so, I'm just thinking about, Lainey would, she's earning money, so she'll want money for whatever she wants to use it for. As long as it's under that $2,000 threshold, she can have money to buy Barbies or go to the movies or whatever she wants.
Yeah.
But now the ABLE account doesn't have the $2,000 threshold.
No, that's, they have a threshold where you can only put so much in it each year.
Okay.
You're thinking of Social Security has the threshold.
Yeah, that's only if she has like a checking account, she can only have $2,000 worth of money or assets.
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to make her a beneficiary or any child or adult who receives state and federal benefits a beneficiary straight, because they'll have to give technically all those resources back to the state, by spending it for those services they get through their Social Security and Medicaid. Now, I'm a parent mentor, jack of all trades, master of none. But what I offer to folks, besides, telling them about my little 2-cent piece worth of it, I know all the real experts in all these topics. Because, if you ever come to one of my workshops, I do the intro, I do the logistics, I thank people, kiss baby, shake hands. I bring the content expert in to talk to groups. So maybe that's something we can maybe start setting up. Let's bring in the ABLE stable guy. Absolutely. Let's bring in Bill Broker to talk about power of attorney or supported decision-making through Georgia Advocacy, and hear about these opportunities. There's more too. And the big thing that I find with our families of all kids with disabilities is when they leave us, they're just trying to make it through the end of the high school career, but it's a cliff. They no longer have that SPED team or school guidance counselor. Now, people like me are out there all the time, and I help adults still, but we need to make sure they know where to go. So they don't have to know it at this level, this stage in their lives. All I want them to do is know that somebody out there knows exactly what their next step should be. And there's a document that comes with y'all. When Lainey graduates from high school, she's going to receive something called an SOP. It is part of her IEP, and it's given at the exit from public education under special education. It stands for Summary of Performance, and it covers all categories of her school life, and then it'll have next steps. So it's kind of like a little roadmap that you take and say, all right, I got to do this now. But I find that people don't know who to do that with in our community. So that's my goal, is to make sure other people know what I know before I vanish into the hemisphere, and build capacity for our parents.
Yeah.
Say, because y'all help other parents, and they can help other parents, and so on and so on. Because y'all know how this works.
Well, that's why this discussion is so good, because now we'll be able to share this
Absolutely
with others that are kind of where we're at. And I've had other parents say to me, write down and record everything she says, just
it's a thing, and you got to hear it over and over. You got to see the people that do it, and then see examples. And the Night of Champions is a great example to tie back to like Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. How did I get my kid up on that stage? What was the backwards planning? Where did it start? It started actually in first grade. I can tell you what should be happening in elementary, middle, and high, and the importance of understanding disability, how it impacts you, asking for help, understanding accommodations, and for our kids, understanding how ADA supports them, because when they leave, they no longer have an IEP or 504. They fall under ADA, and and just make it. We just try to build their skills. That's our goal, is to build skills, and support our parents, because there's always somebody who's been there before.
Yeah. And then with the now comp waiver, and I know you've mentioned this to me before. So is that something that we need to go ahead and apply as well?
I would.
Or do we need to wait till she gets accepted in Medicaid?
No, you can go ahead and get that application in there, because they'll keep it. Yeah, what they do, they find you pre-eligible. You go on something called a planning list. And so as she ages through our system, gets closer to exiting. That's what I'm saying. You don't want to rush through school, because there's no guarantee. There's 6,000 people on the waiting list in Georgia. So it's based on most in need. So if Lainey has 2 years of eligibility left in her school district, they're going to say, well, you need to stay there until your priority is higher. We'll look at funding, and then still there's a waiting list. It's hard. So parents can use family support to pay for some of it, and VR to pay. It's a tough thing for these families until that waiver is awarded. Yeah. But you do want to stay and maximize it.
It's interesting talking about this, because as you're speaking, I'm thinking about where my child sits. You know what I mean? And obviously, we've tried to get her private insurance, and that's been a real issue with her having a diagnosis of Down syndrome. Right. So the idea of losing Medicaid is that's that's our first fear.
That's fear.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a huge fear. Yeah, you want her to work and have independence. Yeah.
Where she doesn't need more of the supports probably eligible for other children that are more severely disabled. So it's you're saying these things, and I'm kind of thinking, well, where does she fit in this? And
where she fits today may not be where she fits 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now.
Right.
So so it does change. And I always suggest we need to meet families where they are in the journey. And I try to talk about it so people are aware there's something out there, because there's nothing worse to be a parent starting the journey with a young child and thinking there's nothing out there. But I always like to talk about there's so many opportunities for kids with disabilities now. It is unbelievably exciting. It's the reason why I still stay in the work, because I've seen it when we institutionalized individuals. That's how old I am. But now we have kids working, independent living. I mean, it's just so much. And it's very exciting time to be in this field.
Very exciting.
But we want to make sure that parents have the same knowledge and resources, because there's nothing worse than having a kid who can work and wants to work, and the parents are not in support of it because of the fear factor. So we got to do better educating families. So
right.
Well, and that's why I love working with y'all. Yeah.
Well, and the real fear is that if they go over that threshold,
Right.
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
they're going to lose benefits.
Right. Yes, it is real. So it's like, how do
Yeah.
we help protect? And you're not ready to think about that when you got a 12-year-old. You're
And
thinking
it's almost like a shell game. It's almost you got to play the game in order to make sure that
Mhm.
they can still get the benefit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, but I'm so happy about stable accounts in Georgia. It's
Yeah.
a huge tool. And if they raise the threshold to 10,000, that would be unbelievably great. But under Social Security, there's also work incentives like a PASS plan. And those are plans that somebody can save for a certain goal. So there's other tools out there, but again, you have to learn about it. And I do a navigator workshop with the expert. I don't do it. I know not to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And they come in and they go through the formulas with you. You can bring your kid's pay stub and let's go through it and let's work these formulas. And they're not that complicated. I mean, because I can do it and I don't have any math skills. But
Right.
what you want to do is get every benefit you can for your kid, but you want to encourage that work independence. You want them to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always, you always have to think about, wonder if we're not around anymore.
Right.
And
You have to plan for the
are we
worst, hope for the
prepared for
best.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another conversation. How to prepare for that end of life stage for families.
Right.
And now kids with Down syndrome are becoming old people with Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot, changes, medically for them too. That medical piece is getting big, which who thought, I know adults with Down syndrome who are in their 60s. So it's, that they were a rarity. Now they're becoming a lot more common,
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Nobody over 40 typically.
yeah. So think, where will you be when your child is 60? Yeah. She may be taking care of you. But you have to, think about, how do you prepare for the day that I'm not here? So,
Right.
and people, there's a lot,
So where do we get power of attorney forms? Is that something you can get off the internet?
I'm going to send it to you.
Oh, that's a link. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to send you my electronic flyer about the now comp waivers.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll send you the power of attorney forms and the healthcare directive and some more information about what is guardianship. I mean, we used to only talk about guardianship, but I like to say, think of it as a continuum from least restrictive to most restrictive. It's an individual family decision for sure. So it's not
Yeah. And
but I'm always here. Yeah.
When we post this discussion, we'll put those links along with it.
Okay, cool beans. Yeah. I may not get them to you till the morning.
Oh, no,
that's
that's fine.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. But yes, I'm so glad you're doing it because, I have somebody who's in their 30s reaching out to me right now. And I have, as a family of mental health and their son's 24. And you think about, they're like, where do I go? And I'm thinking, we need a place in our community that we can say, go here. At least they can give you that warm handoff to the agency that supports our adults, and it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
We don't have.
If only we had someone that was chair of the council of the state of Georgia to.
Yeah, you love that. Yeah. Now my goals on that actually, I want to increase vocational opportunities for all students, especially our kids on the spectrum, adults on the spectrum, because that's a unique training style. We need more project search models, but we need them for adults. So that's another goal. But what my council does, we collaborate with GVRA about how they spend their funds, and so we look at the needs of a community, job opportunities, what's happening in the school, what kind of resources that area has. Is it rural? Is it urban? And talk about what are the barriers to employment and what can we do to help overcome the barriers. Number one barrier is actually transportation. Getting to work.
I would imagine.
So, yeah. So that's been some interesting stuff. But what I take people's their concerns and their thoughts about how we prepare individuals for employment, in our community. I listen to job coaches, parents, individuals who are trying to get a job. So, and then I like to push information out. So I hope y'all can, come next week and come in September or film it in September. If you want to film it, if you want to StreamYard that and make it, you're welcome to do that. So then we could share it.
Yeah. Would we have to get okay through them at all, I wonder?
No, I'm the person setting it up.
Oh.
What date is that in September?
It's the 29th of September.
Okay.
It's going to start at 9 and we're going to have some specialized resource tables there. We're going to have high school high tech. We're going to have employability and goodwill, Parent Mentor, which is my group that I work for in the district, Parent to Parent of Georgia, which is the Parent Training Information Center for our state. GVRA will have a table, and see, they got Roosevelt Warm Springs and Cave Springs and the stuff that they do within the school districts themselves. And then those individual services like job shadowing, job coaching, job placement. That's what you see with the kids who are getting jobs through supportive employment. So we're going to have, really talk about, we're out here. There's resources to support our individuals, especially, when they leave school. But we're also like, if you got a kid sitting at home after the pandemic and you got a barrier to employment, we want you to connect with VR and help you get, That was important for our community or for our financial situation in our communities. We need these folks working, because a lot of times, somebody has to stay home with them. So we want work, but so that'd be something I'll be happy to collaborate with y'all on.
Okay,
get posted. Great. Yeah. But anyway, I enjoyed it. I hope I answered some of those burning questions.
Thank you.
Sure
Thank you.
This will create more questions.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to have part B and C, because as you do it, and then you may find that this didn't work, we got to look at something else. So we find that, but you're at the front of the power curve on this one. So as that, you're ahead of it. But it's important to start it now. Yeah. But I'll get those flyers to y'all so we can get them out there.
Okay.
Thank you, Miss Julie.
Thank you, Miss Julie.
Thank you.
Tell Mr. Frank you said hello.
He's cooking dinner. I got out of it. I'll talk to y'all soon. So,
all right.
Thank you. Good night.
Right, good night. So.